Weimar Classicism is a German literary and cultural movement, whose practitioners established a new humanism, from the synthesis of ideas from Romanticism, Classicism, and the Age of Enlightenment. The Weimar Classic movement lasted 33 years, from 1772 until 1805, and involved intellectuals such as Johann Wolfgang Goethe, Johann Gottfried Herder, Friedrich Schiller, and Christoph Martin Wieland, and then was concentrated upon Goethe and Schiller during the period 1788 to 1805. Development. Background: the German Enlightenment, called neoclassical, burgeoned in the synthesis of empiricism and rationalism as developed by Christian Thomasius and Christian Wolff. This philosophy circulated widely in many magazines and journals, profoundly directed the subsequent expansion of German-speaking and European culture. The inability of this common-sense outlook convincingly to bridge feeling and thought, body and mind, led to Immanuel Kant's epochal, critical philosophy. Another, though not as abstract, approach to this problem was a governing concern with the problems of aesthetics. In his Aesthetica of 1750, Alexander Baumgarten defined aesthetics, which he coined earlier in 1735, with its current intention as the science of the lower faculties, which earlier figures of the Enlightenment had neglected. It was no inquiry into taste, into positive or negative appeals, nor sensations as such, but rather a way of knowledge. Baumgarten's emphasis on the need for such sensuous knowledge was a major abetment to the pre-Romanticism, known as Sturm und Drang, of which Goethe and Schiller were notable participants for a time. Cultural and historical context following Goethe's competition with and separation from Wieland and Herder. The movement Weimar Classicism is often described to have occurred only between Goethe's first stay in Rome and the death of Schiller, his close friend and collaborator, underrating especially Wieland's influence on German intellectual and poetic life. Therefore, the Weimar Classicism could also be started with the arrival of Wieland and extended beyond Schiller's death until the death of Wieland or even of Goethe himself. In Italy, Goethe aimed to rediscover himself as a writer and to become an artist, through formal training in Rome, Europe's school of art. While he failed as an artist, Italy appeared to have made him a better writer. Schiller's evolution as a writer was following a similar path to Goethe's. He had begun as a writer of wild, violent, emotion-driven plays. In the late 1780s he turned to a more classical style. In 1794 Schiller and Goethe became friends and allies in a project to establish new standards for literature and the arts in Germany. It was named in light of the four authors' immense significance, and, more particularly, of Goethe's and Schiller's, both of whom resided in the Duchy of Saxe-Weimar at this time, hence the toponymic Weimar Classicism. Responding to Johann Joachim Winckelmann's Gedanken über die Nachahmung der griechischen Werke in der Malerie und Bildhauerkunst und Geschichte der Kunst des Altertums, Goethe and Schiller developed a literary pursuit and praxis of the imitation of ancient Greek classical models, a veritable undertaking of socio-cultural reformation through aesthetic conceptions and values, where organic wholeness and harmony were of central inspiration and importance. By contrast, the contemporaneous and efflorescing literary movement of German Romanticism was in opposition to Weimar and German Classicism, especially to Schiller. It is in this way both may be best understood, even to the degree in which Goethe continuously and stringently criticized it through much of his essays, such as On Dilettantism, On Art and Literature. After Schiller's death, the continuity of these objections partly elucidates the nature of Goethe's ideas in art and how they intermingled with his scientific thinking as well, inasmuch as it gives coherence to Goethe's work. Weimar Classicism may be seen as an attempt to reconcile, in binary synthesis, the vivid feeling emphasized by the Sturm und Drang movement with the clear thought emphasized by the Enlightenment, thus implying Weimar Classicism is intrinsically unplatonic. On this Goethe remarked, The idea of the distinction between classical and romantic poetry, Dichtung, which is now spread over the whole world, and occasions so many quarrels and divisions, came originally from Schiller and myself. I laid down the maxim of objective treatment of poetry, and would allow no other, but Schiller, who worked quite in the subjective way, deemed his own fashion the right one, and to defend himself against me, wrote the treatise upon naive and sentimental poetry. He proved to me that I myself, against my will, was romantic, and that my, if a denier, through the predominance of sentiment, was by no means so classical and so much in the antique spirit as some people supposed. The Schlegels took up this idea, and carried it further, so that it has now been diffused over the whole world, and every one talks about classicism and romanticism, of which nobody thought 50 years ago. Centrally, the conception of harmony, as it was earlier accepted as a fundamental element in Greek culture by German classicism, profoundly embedded within Weimar Classicism, which developed during a period of social turmoil and upheaval, is neither an aim toward Platonic perfection nor, as promoted by the German Romantics, toward universality, which was systematized later by G.W.F. Hegel. In fact, it is the sole expression of a particular singular or imperfect integrity. Similarly, Goethe held that the two polarities of classicism and romanticism may be employed in a work of art by means of excellence and discretion, and that the naive and sentimental forms of poetry, which are displayed by classicism and romanticism, respectively, remain within a relation of mutual dependence according to which they are limited. The Weimar movement was notable for its inclusion of female writers. Other women published by Schiller included Sophie Meroux, Friederike Bruns, Amalia von Imhoff, Eliza von der Recke, and Louise Brackmann. Between 1786 and Schiller's death in 1805, he and Goethe worked to recruit a network of writers, philosophers, scholars and artists to their cause. This alliance later became known as Weimar Classicism, and it came to form a part of the foundation of 19th-century Germany's understanding of itself as a culture and the political unification of Germany. Aesthetic and philosophical principles. Similar to the binarity noted above is Schiller's treatment of Formtrieb and Stofftrieb, when the two of them, via reciprocal coordination, in a proto-Hegelian, dialectical fashion, give birth to Spieltrieb, that is to say, the aesthetic par excellence. Schiller's elementary attitude toward art is given in What Difference Can a Good Theatrical Stage Actually Make? Art should remain play, but also be poetic play. All art is dedicated to joy, and there is no higher and more serious task than of making people happy. The highest enjoyment, however, is the freedom of the inner life of feeling and the living play of all of its powers. Concepts. I cannot help laughing at the aesthetical folks, said Goethe, who torment themselves in endeavoring, by some abstract words, to reduce to a conception that inexpressible thing to which we give the name of beauty. Beauty is a primeval phenomenon, a phenomenon which itself never makes its appearance, but the reflection of which is visible in 1,000 different utterances of the creative mind, and is as various as nature itself. These are essentials used by Goethe and Schiller for which it is necessary to understand the course of their project. Three key terms. Gehalt, the inexpressible, Weltthought, or import, which is alive in the artist and the percipient that he or she finds means to express within the aesthetic form. Hence Gehalt is implicit with form. A work's Gehalt is not reducible to its inhaled Gestalt, the aesthetic form, in which the import of the work is stratified. That emerges from the regulation of forms abstracted from the world or created by the artist, with sense relationships prevailing within the employed medium. Stoff. Schiller and Goethe reserve this for the forms taken from the world or that are created. In a work of art, stuff is to be indifferent, that is, it should not arouse undue interest, deflecting attention from the aesthetic form. Indeed, Stoff needs to be in such a complete state of unicity with the gestalt of the art symbol that it cannot be abstracted except at the cost of destroying the aesthetic relations established by the artist. In sum, Gehalt and Stoff must coalesce through the creative, aesthetic potential of the artist as a means to manifest Gestalt whereby all faculties converge within the percipient who may thereby participate in a perceptive aesthetic imagination in lieu of the artist's artistic imagination. Primary authors. Wieland. Christoph Martin Wieland was the first writer to arrive in Weimar. In 1772 he was called by the widowed Anna Amalia of Brunswick-Wolfenbüttel, then regent of the Duchy Saxon-Weimar, to educate her son. Weimar remained Wieland's home until his death. Here, in 1773, he founded Der Deutsche Merkur, which under his editorship became the most influential literary review in Germany. Herder. 1776, 1 year after his arrival, Goethe arranged that Herder was called to Weimar, whom he had admired already in his Strasbourg years. Goethe and Schiller. Although the vociferously unrestricted, even organic, works that were produced, such as Wilhelm Meister, Faust, and West-Ostlicher, Divan, where playful and turbulent ironies abound, may perceivably lend Weimar Classicism the double, ironic title, Weimar Romanticism. It must nevertheless be understood that Goethe consistently demanded this distance via irony to be imbued within a work for precipitate aesthetic effect. This, similar to what Schiller wrote of Burger's poetry, partly explains the varied nature of the works they both produced in a considerable light and how it is they can sometimes escape the most exacting of categorizations. The vast array of writings themselves, other than being solely literary pursuances or distiche, include scientific, philosophic, and aesthetic disquisitions and periodicals as well. Schiller was remarkably prolific during this period, writing his plays Wallenstein, Mary Stuart, The Maid of Orleans, The Bride of Messina and William Tell. Primary works of the period. Christoph Martin Wieland. Alcester. Die Geschichte der Abderiten. Han und Gulpener. Shaklolo. Oberon. Die Shinnestan. Geheime Geschichte des Philosophien Peregrinus Proteus. Agatha Damon. Aristipp und einige seiner Zeitgenossen. Johann Gottfried Herder. Volkslieder nebst untermischten anderen Stücken. Ideen zur Philosophie der Geschichte der Menschheit. Briefe zur Beförderung der Humanität. Terpsichore. Christliche Schriften. Metakritik zur Kritik der Rien und Vernunft. Caligon. Johann Wolfgang Goethe. Egmont. Wilhelm Meister's Theatralische Sendung. Stella. Ein Schauspiel für Liebende. Iphigenie of Doris. Torquatori Tasso. Römische Elegien. Venetianische Epigramm. Faust. Ein Fragment. Beatrage zur Optik. Der Bürger General. Reineke Fuchs. Unterhaltung in deutscher Ausgabe 10. Das Märchen. Wilhelm Meister's Lehrjahre. Faust. Eine Tragödie. Novelle. Hermann und Dorothea. Die Nächtliche Tochter. Die Wohlverwandtschaften. Friedrich Schiller. Don Carlos. Über den Grund des Venügens und tragischen Gegenständen. Augustenberger Briefe. Über Anmut und Würde. Carliers Briefe. Über die ästhetische Erziehung des Menschen. Über naive und sentimentalische Dichtung. Der Taucher. Die Kraniche des Ibicus. Ritter Toggenburg. Der Ring des Polycrates. Der Geistesherr. Die Bürgschaft. Wallenstein. Das Lied von der Glock. Maria Stuart. Die Jungfrau von Orleans. Die Braut von Messina. Das Siegesfest. Wilhelm Tell. Die Huldigung der Künste. Demetrius. By Goethe and Schiller, both in collaboration. Die Horin. Musenalmanach. Xenian. Almanac. Propyline. See also. Works by Herder, works by Goethe, and works by Schiller. Influence. Weimar Classicism's two most notable exponents, Goethe and Schiller, especially influenced later Germans where their works have been read and studied by fellow playwrights, and also philosophers. Hegel, Schopenhauer, Nietzsche. Musicians were inspired to compose for the works of these writers. Ludwig van Beethoven, Paul Dukas, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, Carl Friedrich Zelter. Through the efforts of Scotsman Thomas Carlyle, who translated some of these works and wrote a biography of Schiller, they became more accessible to the English-speaking peoples in the mid-19th century. Some of Goethe's ideas in the theory of colors have impacted scientific figures such as Charles Darwin. Goethe's color spectrum is still used. Selected literature. Primary Schiller. C. Friedrich, on the aesthetic education of man. In a series of letters, ed. and trans. By Wilkinson, Elizabeth M. and L.A. Willoughby, Clarendon Press, 1967. Secondary Amron, F. Zucker, F.J., and Wheeler. Goethe and the Sciences. A Reappraisal. BSPS. Riedel, 1987, ISBN 90-277-2265-X. Bishop, Paul and R.H. Stevenson, Friedrich Nietzsche and Weimar Classicism, Camden House, 2004, ISBN 1-57113-2805. Goethe's Late Verse, in the Literature of German Romanticism, ed. by Dennis F. Mahoney, Volume 8 of the Camden House History of German Literature, Rochester, Y. 2004. Bortmeyer, Dieter, Weimar Classic. Portrait einer Epoche, Weinheim, 1994, ISBN 3-89547-1127-7. Buschmeyer, Matthias, Kaufmann, Kai. Einführung in die Literatur des Sturm und Drang und der Weimarer Klassik, Darmstadt, 2010. Cassirer, Ernst, Goethe und die geschichtliche Welt, Berlin, 1932. Ellis, John, Schiller's Carly Asbriefer and the Study of His Aesthetic Theory, The Hague, 1970. Kerry, S. Schiller's Writings on Aesthetics, Manchester, 1961. Nisbet, H.B., Goethe and the Scientific Tradition, Leeds, 1972, ISBN 0-85457-050-0. Martin, Nicholas, Nietzsche and Schiller. Untimely Aesthetics, Clarendon Press, 1996, ISBN 0-19-815913-7. Riemsma, Jan Philipp, Der Liebe Maskentans. Aufsätze zum Werk Christoph Martin Wielands, 1999, ISBN 3-251-00453-0. Stevenson, R.H., The Cultural Theory of Weimar Classicism in the Light of Coleridge's Doctrine of Aesthetic Knowledge, in Goethe 2000, ed. by Paul Bishop and R.H. Stevenson, Leeds, 2000. Die ästhetische Gegenwartigkeit des Vergangenen. Goethes Maximen und Reflexionen über Geschichte und Gesellschaft, Erkenntnis und Erziehung. Goethe Jahrbuch 114, 1997, 101-12, 382-84. Goethe's prose style. Making Sense of Sense. Publications of the English Goethe Society, 66, 1996, 31-41. Goethe's Conception of Knowledge and Science, Edinburgh, 1995, ISBN 0-7486-0538-X. Wilkinson, Elizabeth M., and L.A. Willoughby, The Whole Man, in Schiller's Theory of Culture and Society, in Essays in German Language, Culture and Society, ed. Pro Real, London, 1969, 177-210. Goethe, Poet and Thinker, London, 1972. Willoughby, L.A., The Classical Age of German Literature 1748-1805, New York, 1966.